One second. Okay. Welcome everybody back to the Peruvian Waltz pod. I apologize. We started 2 minutes later. Only 2 minutes were lost, so it's a big loss. I had a little bit of technical difficulty before we started the pod. For some reason, my internet disconnected me. It was only on this laptop. It wasn't on my PC for some reason. So we only lost 2 minutes, so it's nothing. So before we start, as always, I'll introduce my guest. It's Christopher's turn to be introduced first. How are you, Christopher?
Still a little bit in shock after the Daniel Peredo news that we got yesterday, unfortunately. But at the same time, we had it wasn't that good of a game, but we had a Rosario game today, so excited to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about both for sure. And Peter, why don't you introduce yourself as always?
Yes, hello. Again, apologies for the late start, but Brian was dealing with some #Peru problems, and that is Wi-Fi crapped out just at the worst possible time. Then again, when does Wi-Fi ever crap out at a good time? It always seems to happen at just the worst possible moment.
Now, I am looking at this. I'm looking at this computer here, and I can see what Christopher was saying about me looking blurry because it looks blurry on the stream as well. I got this new HD camera, all excited, and I look like a doll. Like, I mean, come on. Anyway, let's get more serious for a more touchy topic. We'll spend just a brief moment on this. So, any Peruvian would know that Daniel Peredo unfortunately passed away yesterday. I don't know how it happened, but like apparently he got a heart attack, something like a cardiac arrest. Don't really know the difference. And yeah, it's very unfortunate that it happened, but I mean, saying today we might be here, tomorrow we don't know what we will be. And yeah, well, he was definitely the most loved Peru commentator out there. The news was huge. Like it was like if Paulo Guerrero died. It was something like if he died, the impact would have been just as big. Yeah. So what I want to talk about is I wanted to ask you guys, what is your favorite Daniel Peredo quote? I'll start with you, Christopher.
Probably, to me, one of the most memorable ones was after the Ecuador game that we win in Quito 2-1. Gloria a Peru en las alturas, right? Mm-hmm. Glory to Peru in the highest. Yeah. Which is a pun because it's in the highest in English, but it's in the altitude, right? In up high in the mountains, and so. It was just such a historic moment, and obviously he narrated all those games that we're going to be watching 30 years from now, saying that's when Peru qualified for the World Cup again.
Yeah, and how are you, Peter?
I mean, my God, just the fact that there are so many shows how great of a commentator he was. Just the classic combination of, both knowledge of the game and the passion he had for his country. The one that stands out for me, though, was, and I think that this was probably, you could argue, his most famous goal, called the Johan Fano goal against Argentina at the death, when he was recapping what happened. Con el corazón de Vargas, con los huevos de Vargas. That one was just legendary. It still makes me laugh every time. I watched that immediately yesterday when I was looking at old clips, just to kind of relive some of his best games, and that certainly stood out to me.
It was certainly passionate because, well, that goal, all the Peruvians, they yelled that out, of course, but it was the most pointless, important goal in Peru history. Let's face it. I mean, Peru were already eliminated, and they only got a draw. So it was really just because we did not deserve to lose that game. My favorite quote, my two favorite quotes, one that I always repeat to myself now, or say to friends, is "Si no sufrimos no vale," which always means if we don't suffer, it doesn't count. And that is probably my favorite of them all because, I mean, I always find myself saying that to whenever I'm playing a video game or something, or if I'm watching like a really bad game, and like today this Rosario game, I was thinking of "Si no sufrimos no vale." If we don't suffer, it doesn't count for my analysis. So I had to suffer through that. I'm sorry, Christopher. I know it's your team or your city team anyways, but it was a terrible game. We'll get on to that later. And si no sé si es justo, pero es cierto, which means I don't know if it's fair, but it's true, which is also very truthful quote for sure. It's the good way of looking at life, not looking at what ifs and whatnot. So yeah, really sad that he passed away. He was really passionate about football. He knew how to debate. He knew how to have fun, how to laugh. I unfortunately never got to meet him as a journalist. I was hoping to someday, but that day will never come now. So yeah, that's a little tribute to Daniel Peredo. In the edited version of this, I'll include a little special intro along with the Peru Campeón song. And I'll include a little special intro for it. And then that you won't see it on the YouTube version, but you'll see it here. So let's move on to the Copa Sudamericana now. So rest in peace, Daniel Peredo. You will never be forgotten. Now, before I wanted to move on to the Copa Sudamericana, I just wanted to say that I don't know what happened to my camera, but it's really bothering me right now. I just can't get over it. I just bought it, really excited. It looks great on here, but it doesn't. I can't take it off either because I need to see the chat. That's the worst part. So I got to suffer through it. Si no sufrimos, no vale. So. Okay, well, anyways, let's begin. So first, before we go to Sport Rosario, this should be the first match we're talking about. But last week, we briefly previewed Sport Huancayo against Unión Española. And I said they were going to lose. They didn't lose, so they certainly surprised me. And I think that that was a very surprising result. I was quite impressed. Sure, they were a bit poor in the final third. Their decision making was non-existent, but I was pretty maybe not impressed, but I was surprised for sure. I did not expect Huancayo to go there and get a draw when they're so awful away from home in Peru. They didn't win this past yesterday. This past week they couldn't win even yesterday. Peter, I know you saw this game. How do you see this match? How do you see the tactics? How do you see Unión Española and so on?
Well, first of all, your camera actually looks great, by the way, finally.
Thank you.
It turned out.
Celebrate. So there's, 1 point to Brian Birdie.
No sé si es justo, solo sé que es cierto.
Yeah. just in memory of Peredo, we'll just keep dropping quotes of his all show long.
Let's do that.
Or at least we'll try to. But anyway, as for the game itself from earlier tonight, I still don't know how Sport Rosario walked out with a draw, and not only a draw, but
I think we got distracted. We're talking about Sport Huancayo.
Sorry, Sport Huancayo. Thank you for correcting me from embarrassing myself.
I'll keep an error in from when we edited it. But let's stay on focus. We just had banter this whole pod. Let's stay on task, okay?
Yeah. Anyway, so. If anybody did read my tactical recap on the Peruvian Waltz, they'll pretty much know how this game played out. But to those who maybe didn't catch it, I'll give them a brief recap. Huancayo did a great job of just neutralizing Union's attack, and they got what they needed. Now, you would hope that from a Huancayo point of view, they use the home advantage well, unlike Sport Rosario, which we'll get onto later. But they were brilliant, timely pressing. They retreated when they had to. They countered when they had to. They doubled up the flanks to prevent space out wide in case Union tried to spread the play. They maybe could have utilized Neumann more, but I think overall they still created a couple of decent chances, just couldn't really finish them. And overall, that was a solid result, I think, in the end. And, yes, in any other situation, maybe a little bit of an issue because they didn't score. But as long as they used every single advantage of theirs at home, then I think a 0-0 is just fine.
Yeah, a 0-0 is fine. There's the danger of the away goal, but I think as long as they play in Huancayo, I think they should win because they're really good at home. They have bottled it in South America before continental competition. They have bottled it. I'm thinking particularly against Sol America where they just couldn't win, but they've also been. For the most part, they haven't been terrible at home. I think their record at home is better than their loss record. I think they haven't lost at home in South America yet. Even when they lost 9-0 to Defensor Sporting, the return leg, they actually won. So that's something that keeps me optimistic, and I think they'll go through now. I wasn't so sure at the beginning, but that result was really favorable for them. And I got to keep my expectations low because Unión Española could easily draw. Sport Huancayo, or at least in culture of the competition, they're known for not extinguishing their opponent in the Sudamericana or the Libertadores. They just kind of like they just score and then they're happy with the 1-0, and that was a bit risky. This cost them the qualification specifically in South America. So yeah, I thought Kortrek was the best player of the match. Everyone says Marcos Yuya, but Marcos Yuya, all he did was show his skills on the ball, but whenever he had to make his pass, it just didn't come out for him.
Yeah,
and I've been a bit disappointed with him this season so far because he's not been as unpredictable as he used to be. He's been a bit disappointing, but yeah, Unión Española were really poor in my opinion. They just did the same play over and over again, and the crosses were terrible for the most part. So I'll go over to Christopher before ramble on anymore. Christopher, what do you think? What do you think of this match?
Well, with exception of what's his name, Rodrigo Colombo, right? Who got the red card? Who saw the red at the end there?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the defense did a pretty good job on such an important game away from home. I would agree with most of what you guys have been saying. I think because it's Peru, right? We can't say that we have any game in the bag, and we've been saying this week after week as we go through Libertadores and now through Sudamericana. But considering that Huancayo, like we were saying last week, is also their stronghold, then hopefully we will see a good match on the second leg, and especially if they can keep them from scoring that away goal, like Brian was saying a second ago.
That was my only concern, that the lack of the away goal, but I was also concerned about them losing. So I guess I'll take what I can get. So, yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add, Peter or Christopher, before we can move on to Sport Rosario?
I did kind of want to say one thing, and it was kind of related to what you said about Yulia, because he's going to have to really improve if Huancayo want to get the result at home in the second leg. But some other players who I think Huancayo need more out of, Sebastian Lojas and Luis Trujillo, who both played out wide in the first leg and obviously play out wide most of the time. They weren't too impactful outside of the opening minutes in the first half, I thought. But on the contrary, I thought Alfredo Rojas and Ricardo Salcedo were brilliant in the heart of midfield, especially defensively. Maybe not so much going forward, but in terms of just nullifying and restricting Union's attack, I thought they were very, very good, and they will probably also be key in the second leg as well. But they're going to need more from their wide forwards, especially.
Well, first of all, Marcio Valverde was missing. I mean, he was poor yesterday, yeah, but I still think he's a very, very good player. I still think he's one of the most underrated players in the league, one of the most underrated midfielders. But my main concern, at least what I saw yesterday, and it changed in the second half with Neumann and Yuya coming on, and this is a totally different game from Unión Española, but it kind of still relevant to this. So with Huancayo, both their fullbacks overlap. They play really high up.
Right.
And they leave one midfielder back, the two center backs stay back, the midfielders stay back. That's how Guilherme likes to play. And it can be concerning because they're very vulnerable to the counter, in my opinion. But I think in Huancayo, they should be able to handle them. I think the set pieces are the most dangerous thing for Unión Española. That's what it's going to be anyways. That's what it was against a few of the past opponents. And, yeah, the second leg's not for a while, so it'll be pointless to discuss it now. Maybe something changes in a few months that we don't know about. It'll be like discussing our final World Cup squads now. We're not going to discuss our final World Cup squads. We're going to discuss, our first preliminary World Cup squad of today. We're not going to discuss the final one, but I think you get my point in what I'm saying. And, yeah, I think Huancayo are going to go through. I did not expect to say that before, but I do think they'll go through now. And, I'm happy they got the draw. I'm happy they surprised me. As always with the Peruvians, I don't always expect them to win, but if they're going to surprise me, go for it. I'm still supporting them at all times. So, yeah, let's move on to Sport Rosario, which was another 0-0 draw, although in my opinion this one was even less thrilling because the quality of football was just subpar from both sides. I'll let Christopher go first because he's the one I see. Christopher, how did you see this match?
It was interesting. I think Rosario continues to have the same problem that I saw that I think has carried over from last season that I keep kind of bringing up is that I feel like they have a pretty decent defense, right? But when it comes to attack, they just can't get they can't coordinate amongst themselves. They weren't able to break Cerro defensively this time, and it kind of happened. The same thing kind of happened last weekend with UTC, as we saw them. I mean, they won 4-0, right? But UTC was coming from a lot of games, right, that week. They have traveled out of the country and back, and they had been kind of a really messy week with, or they hadn't traveled out of the country, but they had traveled from. They had an international match, and it was kind of a messy week for them. So in the first half, it was kind of that stalemate, and the second half, out of exhaustion, I feel like UTC gave in, and all the goals came from Sport Rosario. This time around, Sport Rosario was not able to wear down their opponent, right? And that was their tactic all along. Honestly, Cerro did not care if they did not reach goal, right? All they care about was not losing that game, right? So therefore, for them, it's really a great, that 0-0 draw in Juarez for them. That is a great match. For Rosario, that was their chance to get ahead, so that they can have a good second leg. And unfortunately, they lost that. I think that honestly, like none of the players really stand out to me much, right? Everybody, especially up front. Up front, there was a few chances. They created a few chances, very scarce chances, and those that they had, they basically wasted them. There was nothing really clear.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything there, except for one thing, and this is I still agree. I still see your point to an extent. I'm just basing on this one match. I've seen Rosario in the other matches. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just basing on this one match. My point. The defense today was very, very poor, in my opinion. Hassawi and Beltran were, well, not so much Beltran, but Hassawi was an open door, while Beltran was just error prone the entire match. So there were two different types of mistakes from them. One was just letting. Agustin Santana was the player of the match, in my opinion, for Atletico Cerro, and he was just going in. I believe it was his right flank, anyways. It was his right flank as I was left, and he was just going in like it was a door to his own house. So he was causing a lot of danger, and I'll talk about Hassawi offensively in a second. But Beltran made, I want to say, 2 or 3 errors that could have cost him the goal. There was one where he instead of passing it back to the keeper like he was supposed to, there were 2 forwards versus 1. Instead of clearing it, instead of passing back to the keeper, he held on, and one of the forwards from Atletico Cerro won the ball back, and he accidentally backheeled it on when he had an open goal. So that was one of the situations. Another one was where he was just completely missing, and one of the Atletico Cerro forwards was going through, and he was on a break. But I kind of forget what happened after that. But I think Liban saved it. But the point is, he was really, really error prone, whereas Hassawi was just an open door, which is 2 different types of mistakes for me. Now, as for Hassawi, he was bad in defense. We've already established that. But up front, he was also very inconsistent. There are some plays that were decent and others that were just horrid. And I think the main problem with Rosario was, as Christopher said, the attack. And what Christopher didn't say was that they always did an extra dribble. And that at least later in the match, they always did an extra unnecessary dribble. It was like what Ronaldo does with the side steps, but Ronaldo actually knows how to do it. That's the difference. He's a world-class player. He's a world-class player, right? But these guys aren't, and it just seemed pointless. There's no need to do those extra side steps or those extra dribbles because they always lost the ball. It was really easy to get the ball from them. The only exception, in my opinion, that was playing intelligently in the attack and was playing well in general was Echemaite, who created a few chances for himself. But as Christopher said again, he was wasteful. So yeah, I think Christopher nailed it there with his analysis, and yeah, it was a very poor performance. I do like Ronaldo Andia, which he's the right back. I didn't think he had a terrible game. I thought he was the standout of the 4 defenders. I thought Kim and Kanoba were much better than Beltran and Hassawi. But yeah, what I saw, Rosario aren't going through us to this because that was their chance to win, and unfortunately, Atletico Cerro aren't very good, and we saw it here. but I think they're better as Rosario, and that's the sad truth, in my opinion. Anyways, it's a sad opinion of that I have, and I think that they can get the away draw, but I don't think they'll do it. I think they're going to lose on the night as well. So, Peter, I'll go over to you. What do you think of this game?
Well, you guys pretty much said it all. I don't really have much to add other than maybe just one little caveat about the attack. And I mean, what Brian said was completely correct about just being, I think, a little bit too cute with the ball when they didn't really have to be. And at the beginning of the second half, this was especially apparent when the likes of Raul Tito and Chanchito Gonzalez were a little more direct and were just playing at a higher tempo and running at the Cerro defense. That's when most of their clear-cut chances were created. And somehow, some way, they strayed away from that after the hour mark, and then Cerro just, shut up shop, closed in the half spaces, the central areas, and then Rosario kind of reverted back to what they were doing in the first half, which was not very good. And it just ended up costing them in the end. And it was really surprising in a lot of ways, because given that, like I said, they were at, in the altitude, they're at home, a pretty full stadium considering the day and time. And yet they didn't take advantage of it all. But yeah, again, they were wasteful, but I thought that they just did not play with enough intensity, which, considering who their coach is, and Pablo Abraham, of course, a disciple of Jorge Sampaoli, you would think that they would play with a lot more of a faster tempo, especially going forward.
Yeah, that's something I didn't mention at all. They were playing really, really slow, and that was so frustrating. I mean, if they played fast and they were wasteful, you know what? Fine. I mean, they're not one of the best teams in Peru. We know that. And you could at least create chances and miss them. It'll frustrate me still, but it won't frustrate me to the extent where it just looks like they're disinterested, looks like they're not trying. So, yeah, Atletico Cerro didn't really do anything right either. They were just kind of like playing off Rosario's mistakes. So, yeah, if you guys don't have anything to add, I guess we can move on. So, if you guys want to jump in, just let me know. And we don't really have to briefly mention Cristal because we kind of did it last week, and the match is still tomorrow. So we'll talk about Cristal next week when they actually play. They're always playing tomorrow, but we'll talk about the actual match next week. And I guess we can jump into our next section, which is there's not a preview, a review of Alianza Lima versus Sporting Cristal, which is always the big game in Peru. We're not going to talk about the whole week, just about this specific game. And yeah, a frustrated Alianza Lima. They lost 2-0, and Cristal didn't even look particularly good in the night, but they won comfortably. So, Peter, how do you see this game?
Well, we didn't learn much about Alianza Lima that we didn't already know, and that is their fullbacks in Francisco Duclos and Luis Garros are terrible. And Cristal clearly, I mean, it doesn't take a qualified coach or even, a hardcore fan to notice this. They were trying to exploit the fullback, specifically Duclos, and it came off for them a couple times. I was still a little bit disappointed that the likes of Fernando Pacheco weren't really thriving out wide. But look, I mean, I think the game in a lot of ways changed from two things, which I think we'll probably mention in a little bit: the red card, and then of course the penalty, which Emmanuel Herrera buried pretty decisively. You can maybe say that Carlos Asquez was a bit of a miss. Starting, I think that when Kevin Quevedo came on, the game changed a little bit for Alianza. Once again, no Quevedo, no party, and I've been proven right. Yeah, and it was just, from Alianza's point of view, it's almost shocking how just dull the attack looks. And yes, Tomas Costa is supposed to be sort of the central figure in that, and maybe he needs a bit of time to settle in. But at the moment, it's really hurting Alianza. Whereas with Cristal, yes, they lose the top scorer from last year, Irvin Avila, but it just goes to show you that if you establish the right system and you provide service to the striker, which they are doing, then that player is going to thrive. And I think, just to kind of wrap it up on Cristal's point of view, it's clear that Mario Salas has reorganized the defense, which was absolutely terrible last year. And he's finally got this team playing a little more of an attractive system, even though they weren't great on Sunday, they were still very effective, and I think that he has to be commended for that.
Yeah, the important thing for a good team like Cristal is to grind out results, and especially against a team like Alianza away from home. We didn't lose a single game at Matute last year. Grinding out that was a very good result to grind out, even if you weren't playing particularly great. Yeah, Francisco Duclos and Luis Garro, they're terrible. They not sure what Alianza was thinking in not signing them. They signed Jose Godino, who could play on the left. I think he can even play no, just the left. Sorry, and he's not the best player. He kind of reminds me of Aldo Corso a little bit. He's more defensive than anything, and I think he could be a better option. I don't think he's particularly great, but I think he's definitely a better option than Francisco Duclos.
Mm-hmm.
And Luis Garro both of them are Segunda División quality in my opinion. And Boca Junior. Junior or Guarani. I'm not gonna make straight assumptions. I think Junior will go through that leg, but Boca Junior and Palmeiras are gonna have an absolute field day on those wings. Pablo and Jimmy Chera and Jorge Palmeiras having those two wings, which I'm expecting them to be good because they're Brazilians. So they're definitely not. I'm definitely not looking forward to that. That's going to be a tough one. So, yeah, Christopher, how do you see this game? I'll let you do some of your thoughts.
Well, something I'm going to bring up, and this is also I bring it up also because this is one of Daniel Peredo's last tweets was how horrible the ref was during the game. I mean, it's kind of questionable whether that red card at the end, what actually happened, and if it was worthy of a red to kind of send off a player for what they say. I think it was a curse word, if I'm not mistaken. There was some kind of like little debate discussion between the player and the ref. And there goes the red card, right? And it's almost questionable on whether that was really fair. I mean, I would also say I'm trying to remember mentally what led to that penalty, but you know that right there I think tells you that the penalty maybe wasn't as clear, right? Maybe wasn't something that should have been given. Anyways, I think things kind of played in favor of Cristal, right? I think. I guess there was bad refereeing decisions for both sides, you could say. But still, though, I think Cristal were way more efficient, and I think that speaks well of them. Their game coming up against Lanús, hopefully, that it won't be as bad as I originally thought that it was going to be. And at the same time, yeah, I would agree. I would agree with most of what you said, and especially that, unfortunately, Alianza Lima is going to have a horrible time in the Libertadores.
Yeah, I no disagreements there. So I guess it's enough of the game. It was kind of a short recap, but we're just talking about one game. Peter, did you want to say something based on on that side?
Well, I did actually have something else to say, but I will mention on the refereeing side. I did not have a problem with him sending off Ramirez because he just got booked. And then a couple minutes later, he's arguing with the referee. Like, you really shouldn't be doing that. Players do it all the time, I know, but there has to be more respect for the referees. They have such a tough time as it is. They probably have one of the most difficult jobs in sports, if not the most difficult. You could certainly look at that penalty incident in the first half and immediately say, oh, yeah, that's definitely a penalty. He has one angle to look at that and has to make a split-second decision and this is, of course, the biggest game in Peru, so there's a lot of pressure on him. Everything else, I don't think he called a very good game. I think there were fouls that he called that really shouldn't have been fouls. That last red card on Cespedes really shouldn't have been, in my eyes. But to say he had, if you want to say he had a bad game based on the other stuff, yes. I had no problems with the Ramirez red card because he should have known better. Penalty was, again, 50-50. But Alianza were pretty poor on the night. I don't think it would have been much of a difference. I think Sporting Cristal would have eventually got the breakthrough. And then lastly, just to kind of recap it, I do want to point out, speaking of Cespedes, actually, I thought he and Johan Madrid on both flanks at fullback were very, very good, unlike Alianza's fullbacks. And of course, we see how important that position is becoming in the modern day game. And it looks like Sporting Cristal have a couple of good ones this year, which will really help them in their push for the title.
Yeah, I didn't mention that as well. And Bayonne had a very good game as well.
Yes.
There's someone else. I thought the forwards had a regular game. I don't think they were anything special. I will say Gabriel Costa's improved a lot under Mario Salas. I used to not rate him at all, but he's definitely improved a lot. And I like what I've seen from him so far. Cristal, I'm quite optimistic for the chance against Lanús tomorrow. So, as you guys know, I thought they've improved a lot. So, yeah, let's hope they do well. And I was surprised about Ramirez because, I mean, an experienced player like him, you'd expect more. Like, he's, 31 now? I mean, I'm surprised he definitely argued with the ref after he already got booked. Sometimes these footballers just can't hold their frustration, unfortunately, so no matter the age. So, yeah, anyways, let's move on. I guess this is a good time to answer questions. So, yeah, I'm just going to check with it. Peter, you have the questions.
I do. So we did get one question this week, and thank you again to those who are submitting questions. We're actually surprised we actually get at least one every week, so thank you for that. And again, if you do want to get in your questions in the future, you can tweet at Peru Waltz. You can tweet either of us, really. We'll see it at Galindo PW, myself, Brian at B_Bertie98, and then Christopher at Viz_FC.
Hey, you know all our Twitter handles. It's good.
Yes, I do. I have to write them in the podcast description, so they're etched in my memory each and every single week. But anyway, the question is, who are some bright U18 players to watch in La Primera? Unfortunately, I don't have the Twitter handle. Brian, if he can provide that, then thank you. But anyway,
it was a question we got on Facebook. It was by Abel Gamarra, who's actually a friend of mine in New Zealand. So shout out to him.
Okay. So yeah, I guess with that, well, we did pick out 3 talents, but I'll let Brian introduce them and maybe explain a little bit about them to start off.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that the 3 talents are Jairo Concha, Christopher Olivares, and Fernando Pacheco. I almost forgot them, but those are the 3 talents. Those are the 3 talents. All very exciting players. It's kind of funny because I'm a big fan of all of them, and I've been the one I've been longest following is the one I'm least fan of, Fernando Pacheco. Although I still think he's very good. I'll let Peter talk about it first because Peter and I have been following Pacheco since the under-20s last year when he got called at 17. What do you think about Pacheco on his start, Peter?
Well, it's good that he is getting regular minutes under Salas. I think that's going to help his development. The one thing I will say, though, is that I'm not a fan of him playing out wide. I know he can play there. I would much prefer him to see him playing centrally. Of course, that can't happen because Herrera has had a great start to the season, 3 goals in as many games. And he's also got Christopher Olivares, who is going to be competing with him up there. So even though he's playing out wide, I think he can maybe make that position his own. I just think he's adapting to not only becoming a full-time starter, but also adapting to the rigors of the professional game. He's playing against obviously grown men who are much stronger, faster, and are more intelligent just tactically in terms of their positioning. So I think there's going to be a bit of a learning curve with him. But look, he's still 18 years old. And the fact that Salas is utilizing what is actually a pretty impressive crop of 1999 players at Cristal, must be said, is great to see because you also got Olivares coming in as a substitute, as I'm sure we're going to mention later on. But yeah, a talented player, very good finishing on him, which it must be said, and actually quite fast as well. Technically, he's okay. I think that's one area he can improve in, especially if he has to play out wide.
You want to put Fernando Pacheco as a 10 because I seem to recall when he started at Cristal at 16, when he debuted, he played mostly as a 10.
That's right.
And who is the 10 right now, Cristal? I've kind of gone blank here. But Herrera is the striker, and Pacheco is more of a 10, I would say, than a striker. Yeah, I don't think – I'm pretty sure Cristal don't really utilize a 10. I guess you could say Calcaterra's kind of one, but like – it's more Casulo as a defensive midfielder.
Right.
So I would say that they don't really have a 10, but like if you can fit that into the system, then I think Pacheco will thrive.
Yes.
But you're not going to fit in you're going to choose the system to fit in an 18-year-old. So it's kind of risky.
It is. Yeah.
Unless he's Messi, but he's not Messi. So I'll talk about Jairo Concha now because I've been following Jairo Concha more than you guys. We've discussed this before. I've been following Jairo Concha since the Copa Mitad del Mundo last year in Ecuador. I follow him in the Peru under-18 teens. That's also where I discovered Oslin Mora and Christopher Olivares. Pacheco was also there, but I already knew who he was, so he wasn't really a knowledge. Wasn't really anything new to me. And Ado Concha is a very dynamic midfielder, and he's had a brilliant start to his Primera División debut. He's had a brilliant start to his career in Peru, and I think this is the future number 8 for the national team because I really rate him. He's at San Martin. He's been the best player so far, and yeah, he's Categoria 1999, which he will turn 19 this year, and yeah, he's definitely one to watch out for. I highly, if you haven't seen him and you're Peruvian, I highly recommend you watch the San Martin game. He's a really good duo with Jordan Givin right now, and he's doing really well for the side, providing good passes. He always looks forward. He never looks back, and it's really good to have a positive footballer like that again here in Peru.
Let me interject right there and talk a little bit about Concha too. I think that we were discussing this last week, obviously, how Universitario at some moments has used the fact that they have young players as an excuse to do poorly on the league. And I think Concha is the perfect example of a player that he has, less than 10 games in the first division,
Yep.
but he has constantly been, at least on the Peruvian Waltz website, starting or best 11. And I think he's also been in many other websites and media. And honestly, he's showing that he's not kind of just like a one game player, has one good game, but he's starting to show some consistency, and that is something really promising of someone that is 18 years old, not even 19. And I might have some more comments about him in a few minutes.
Yeah, Concha is well, first of all, you all know I'm a big fan of José Mora. He hasn't gotten his chance yet for Alianza, but I wanted to say that he probably will be the starter in the next under-20 squad for Peru, which is going to have Pacheco, Olivares, Concha, and Mora.
Mm-hmm.
Because Mora, what was his name? Ahmed is a big fan of Mora. He's always calling up for the sparrings with the first Peruvian national team side, and yeah, Mora is he's another player to keep an eye out. He hasn't debuted yet. He probably won't debut for a long time because Bengoche just doesn't have him in his plans at the moment. But he's a brilliant player, as Peter obviously knows. I've been hyping him up for about a year now. Not a year, but like half a year.
Well, close to a year, Brian. Let's not exaggerate here.
I'd say
for a while.
I'd say since August. So it'll be like half a year.
Maybe.
But yeah, those are 4 players to keep an eye out on. I added an extra one, and I'll add one more in Jose Bolivar, who I think is going to get more game time for San Martin this season. I don't know why he's not starting. I guess it's because they trust Akendo a lot more. It's a good start, but we're not going to talk about him because he's not Peruvian, and I believe he's 1998 anyways.
Yes.
So one more we can talk about, and we almost forgot him, is Paulo de la Cruz, who has had a kind of up and down start. Like he's showing his talent, but he's showing he's still raw. So I think that we have gambled with a few youngsters, and some have worked well, others have not. Paulo de la Cruz has worked well at the start. He's showing what he's capable of, while others have not worked out good, like Barco, who just an open door for Lau in the course's position. And yeah, it's we'll talk about this in another pod, but I think that we'll have going to be in a bit of trouble because if Corso does well at the World Cup, then he'll probably be off for another club. So we'll talk about that in another pod. That's for another time completely, but that's one worry that for Lowe that I should bring up. No one's really discussing it. But yeah, Concha's totally taking the league by storm. Yes. Everyone is mentioning him here in Peru now, how he's a really good player and how they're surprised and yada yada yada. It's definitely I recommend you check him out if you haven't seen him yet. So yeah, now we're gonna move on to the last part of the pod, the most exciting part, and luckily we have more time to talk about this than I was expecting. I was expecting a 15-minute talk, but we're gonna have a discussion in 20 minutes because it's 20 minutes up to the pod. Our preliminary World Cup squad, the first version, which we're gonna have several versions. I'm gonna try and get one out per month, maybe. Yeah, I think per month is good actually. I'll decide on that after. But yeah, I have my Excel sheet with me. I have all the names with me. It was kind of hard to make this actually because
I still
think there's some depth problems. You gotta give these players a chance. They have talent, even in the Peruvian league. And yeah, I'll be willing to go last. So Christopher, why don't you go first for your list? Why don't you read us your list and we can discuss it a little bit?
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna first of all just give like a 10-second introduction to this. Basically, my train of thought was kind of looking at the last few calls that Gareca has done. Right, he's tried a lot of different players, and my logic was just kind of try to see if those players would still be someone that Gareca would consider. So you're probably not going to see a lot of surprises, right? That they're all familiar names. And I'm going to start with Galese, Cáceres, Carvalho, Penny, and Butrón, right? Now, Araujo, Rodríguez, Ramos, Cela, Santa María, Loyola, Trauco, Corso, Advíncula, Abraham, y Callens, and Counts. And then midfielders, Polo, Flores, Carrillo, Cueva, Hurtado, Tapia, Cartagena, Aquino, Yotun, Gómez, Peña, and I did add Concha. And then forwards, Ruidíaz, Guerrero, Farfán, Da Silva, Reina, Benavente, and Asquez.
Two interesting ones. Concha is definitely a bold one. Asquez, if he does play well the season, I can see him getting called back, just as the others were. The only player I can't see called back, and this is not one you included, but it was one that I was thinking of adding on my list. Carlos Zambrano, who's not even mentioned anymore in Gareca's plans. No surprise there, really.
Well, that's because he also isn't starting for Dynamo Kiev. He has 2 internationals to surpass, so he's going to be basically an established backup, I would assume, unless there's a suspension or injury. So,
no, Zambrano is a child on the field. That is
true.
Problem. And so, because of that, he's part of that generation that left, and I do not want to see that, right? Unless he really improves his game and he starts, maturing.
Yeah,
which is not going to happen.
Why don't you comment a little bit on Christopher's list? I kind of briefly did it, and before I come back to it, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I have no qualms with that. In fact, your so-called surprises, I actually have one of them in my squad as well. So I'll mention it when, of course, I get to it. But yeah, I mean, look, I think that if you're kind of putting your Gareca thinking cap on, that is pretty much what he would do. And I think that the Concha call-up, look, if he continues to play well for, the next month or so or next few weeks, why not give him a call-up, right? You can never have too many central midfielders, especially when, going into this next cycle, you're probably going to want to start bringing in new guys, trying to see how they can settle in and whatnot. So I don't really see the problem with it.
Yeah, and not only that, a part of my logic of why I included Concha is because this 35, right, and this is going to get weeded down to 23. You're going to leave a whole team plus one out of this list, right?
Yeah.
So considering that we don't have that many players that can be called up that are really like at the international level where they could play a World Cup, some of these spots kind of got filled as honorable mentions in my train of thought. And I think that for a young player like Concha, it's not a bad idea, I mean, you're really giving the kid, I mean, like, let's be honest, like Pelé played at his first World Cup, he was 17.
Yep.
Right? So it's not a crazy thought to have such a young player on a list of 35. That doesn't mean that he's going to make it to the World Cup, but that at least tells the kid, hey, you're in the right path, and you should continue to play like you're playing.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. And Gareca did the same thing at the Copa America 2016 to rebuild. Of course, there are not many players that was as young as Concha. I think the youngest one's Beto da Silva. But yeah, that's a good point, and it can definitely be possible. I definitely don't think he'll go to the World Cup, but I think it'd be possible to have him on the list. Although I didn't have him on my list, so. Yeah. So that would be Christopher's list. If you guys have anything else to add, we can go to Peter.
Okay, I guess I'll step up to the plate here. So the only slight difference in terms of like the numbers between Christopher's and mine is that I only had 4 goalkeepers. I kind of went with like the so-called traditional call-up list, and that 35 means 4 goalkeepers usually. So the same exact as Christopher minus Diego Penny. I went with Gaese, Cáceres, Carvalho, and Butron. So the defenders, I believe, are also the exact same. The right backs, Aldo Corso, Luis Advíncula, no surprises there. The center backs go as follows: Christian Ramos, Alberto Rodriguez, Miguel Araujo, Anderson Santamaria, Adrian Sela, Luis Avram, and Alexander Cayens. And then the left backs being Miguel Trauco and Nilson Loyola. So no surprises there. Then my so-called central midfielders, I just kind of grouped everybody who kind of can play in that deeper role, like in the Tapia Yotun positions. They were, of course, Renato Tapia, Yoshimar Yotun, Wilder Cartagena, Pedro Aquino, and Carlos Asquez. That is where we kind of get similar, Christopher and I, and also Sergio Peña. Then the central attacking midfielders, Christian Cueva, Christian Benavente, Jefferson Farfan, Paulo Hurtado, and then the other like wide players that I called up as well, which might be a slight surprise here, but I needed to fill in names, were Jose Manzaneda, Edison Flores, Andre Carrillo, Andy Polo, and Alexi Gomez. And then my forwards, Paulo Guerrero, Raul Ruiz Diaz, Jordi Reina, Irvin Avila, and Alex Sucar and Beto da Silva are round up the forward positions.
Okay, so kind of a similar list to Christopher, although all the lists are going to be similar. I think based on these two, I think I had the most surprises. And yeah, Christopher, why don't you go step to the plate first? What do you think of that on that one?
Okay, so I think my first question right off the bat would be why Irvin Avila? I mean, he had a pretty good season with Cristal last year. I don't know if he's quite up to par this year, but I mean, what was kind of your logic behind that?
So, yes, obviously the top scorer last year, but he has been, I think, a very good all-around striker for Lobos so far this season. I think if it wasn't for him, that attack would be absolutely dreadful. Julian Quiñones wouldn't be able to thrive as much up front. And I think that if you want to kind of throw on someone who I think will maybe not so much be a scoring boost, but just someone who can kind of get everybody involved, like maybe Jefferson Farfan can push up with him. You can have Flores or whoever plays out on the right cut inside and help him. I feel like he just gives you a nice alternative to Paolo as well as Ruiz Diaz. Because I feel
somewhere
like
in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, again, it's a 35-man squad, right? And I feel like his form over the past couple months with Lobos, as well as going back last year with Cristal, yes, he's 28 years old, a bit on the older side, or at least like right in his prime. I feel like why not? Maybe give him a run out, reward him for the past year or so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Avila is also a shout because, I mean, he replaced Mauro Escoto, who I personally thought was pretty good. Mauro Escoto wasn't doing too badly, and yeah, he's doing pretty well for Lobos. I don't think he's been outstanding, but I think he's been good enough. He's definitely having a better stint in his international career than he had in Ecuador with Liga de Quito. So, an interesting one. Now, I don't have many questions for Peter because there's not as much surprises as me or Christopher for that matter. But I do want to mention Kalins, who was I didn't include him on my list. I just spoiler right there. He's another player like Zambrano who gets 0 mentions from Gareca. And some say it's because he rejected the call-up from Gareca in the Copa America 2016. What are your thoughts on this whole matter?
Yeah, it's interesting because certainly with New York City FC, he's been brilliant. I think he was the only player who started and finished all 34 games, if I'm not wrong. He might have gotten sent off on like the last day, but I'm pretty sure he pretty much finished them all. Actually, no, sorry. He did actually get sent off in one against Toronto FC. I was actually at that game. That was the one that he did not. But either way, started all 34 games and finished 33 of them, which is pretty damn impressive.
That's some really good physicality. Like,
well, yeah, exactly.
For that.
Especially when you're traveling across the United States and Canada, you know, obviously the rigors of that travel. Plus, again, he also, I think he's just a very good all-around center back in that, you know, he wins balls in the air very well. The one thing I would say is that his touch isn't great, but again, Ramos and Rodriguez don't necessarily like to play around with the ball all that much. They can, they just choose not to. And of course the system dictates that they don't. But yeah, the whole so-called, if you want to call it, this feud with Gareca and him is a bit strange. But again, I feel like he probably won't call him up. I just put him in there to make up the numbers. And I mean, again, center backs, you can never really have too many, just like with central midfielders.
Right. Okay, I'm going to make my comment short. Basically, anybody that played with Andrea Pirlo and hopefully got some of that wisdom should be in the main squad. So there you go. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, yeah, I mean, kind of along the same lines as what Peter just said, and we'll give you time for you to do your list.
Andrea Pirlo, magician.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess if you don't have anything else to add, I guess I can go on to my list now. So I counted. There is 35, and there is a few surprises in mine. I'd say 2, maybe 3. So okay, so here goes: Pedro Galese, Carlos Casada, Diego Penny, Jose Carvalho, Alberto Rodriguez, Cristian Ramos, Miguel Araujo, Luis Advíncula, Miguel Trauco, Aldo Corso, Anderson Santamaría, Luis Abraham, Nils Loyola, Gustavo Dulanto, Adrián Cela, Yoshimaru Tun, Cristian Cueva, André Carrillo, Paolo Hurtado, Renato Tapia, Edison Flores, Pedro Aquino, Wilder Cartagena, Alexi Gómez, Sergio Peña, Andy Polo, Alejandro Hoberg, Christian Benavente, Jose Manzaneda, and as for the forwards, Jefferson Farfán, Paolo Guerrero, Raúl Ruiz, Jordi Reina, Beto da Silva, Irvin Ávila, and Jose Choro. Okay, I'm just kidding about that last one, but those are 35. Okay, so those are my 35. I had I want to say 2 or 3 surprises in there, definitely 2. So what do you guys think of that one?
Christopher, go for it.
Well, you know what? I was actually I was really thinking about Alianza, right? I was trying to go over when I had a few spots to fill in my list of 35, and I'm kind of thinking who has Gareca not called in the last 12 months that could potentially deserve a call-up. I actually thought about Holberg, and I mean it's obviously way too early to say, but I even thought a little bit about Posito too. I think those are 2 good players from Alianza. Also because I'm like a personal fan of Posito, right? And from him coming from such humble beginnings, basically. But, I mean, it kind of surprises me because it's not a name that we're used to, right? But at the same time, if Gareca did say, I'm Hover is part of the list, I would be like, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Holberg has gotten his chance for the national team, and he didn't take it because I remember he was part of the rebuilding process that Gareca wanted to have. Holberg was one of them, and unfortunately he didn't shine. He didn't do very well, and he was kind of like the weak spot in the Peru team. But he started up the season with Alianza really well, and it's possible he gets a recall for the preliminary squad. Again, I don't think he'll go to the World Cup, but he'd probably be the third option at Edison Flores. I mean, who else do you have there? You have Jose Manzaneda, who is the second option. But after that, there's really no one else. It's not like that right wing that's just loaded with options. The left wing is kind of take out Flores and you don't have much else. So I think Holberg could definitely be an option for the preliminary squad, but it's a big if. He's got to keep performing for Alianza. And Posito's definitely an interesting choice because I think he's a clever tactical player, but he's got to score if he goes for Alianza if he wants to be considered. So, Peter, do you have any thoughts for this one?
Well, I guess the other surprise, you can briefly explain it. Gustavo Dulanto, why did you include him?
Very underrated center back, and he's playing the Libertadores this year, so he's kind of playing internationally. Not playing abroad, of course, but I think he's a really good defender. He started off the season extraordinarily with Garcilaso, probably better than with Ute. He's improved a lot since he
yes.
And he's another reason is because the reason I'm guessing Gareca chose Adrián Cela for New Zealand is because of his strength. So yes. I'm kind of going by that. I chose Dulanto because he's a good defender and because of his height.
Yes.
So I kind of went for that reasoning. And yeah, and one more thing I wanted to mention before we go back to this topic or end the pod. It depends on if you guys have anything else to add. Luis Abraham, I chose him, but I didn't choose him because as a center back. I chose him as the left back option because I think he's a better left back option than Loyola.
I completely agree. Completely agree with that.
I think he's getting better as a player in Argentina. Of course, in Argentina, you don't get many chances. You mess up once, you're going to the bench, especially if you're Peruvian. But I think that he's a better left back option. I think he's playing as left back at Vélez, and I think he could totally works the backup. I personally prefer to Loyola a million times. So, yeah, if you guys have anything else to add, let me know.
So the one thing I do want to just quickly on Dulanto, I actually think he might have a better chance of getting called up than Cayens, just because he's playing on Libertadores, he's playing in the domestic league, which of course Gareca and the coaching staff will be monitoring very closely. And that's actually one position I kind of wanted to add another domestic player in, is at center back, because I figured that would be the one area where a local player would get a call up. So that is the other thing. Maybe I'll throw this question out to all of you. Out of all our so-called surprises, who do you think has the best chance of getting called up?
All right, so we can tweet that out after the pod's done. Christopher, do you have anything else to add, or can we end the pod?
Well, let me think. Well, I was actually going to bring up Cuba. I think he was someone that was kind of called up by Gareca too. That's someone that I kind of thought about adding to my list also. But I guess kind of the position where he plays is kind of already a little overcrowded, you could say.
Finish up.
No, go ahead.
I think Roberto Villamarin could have a chance as well. It's not if he starts getting game time for Atlas, he could be a choice as well. I would guess he'd be the third choice right back, but he's got to stop playing in the U20s. He's got to start playing in the league, or even the Copa MX might be something. But he's got to start playing. It's
not exactly his choice that he's playing in the under-20s, of course, right?
It's not his choice, but if he does get the games, he could be an option for a preliminary squad, because again, he could be part of another rebuilding process that I could bring in for the next process. Mm-hmm. So that could be another choice, but that's all a question of time. Christopher, I guess you can finish saying what you were saying, and then we can end the pod.
Well, I think that was all that I was saying. The last Peredo saying was that I wanted to bring up was la tocó, right?
Oh,
that's a classic.
That was more Quiroga's, but they were both involved in it. So
right.
That's fine.
I would recommend that is our closing music for today's podcast. La tocó.
That's the opening, or the opening is one of them. It's no remix.
Do the closing. La tocó, dude.
I'll try to do like a no remix for the opening. So that'll end the pod. That'll end the pod, guys, and thank you guys for listening. My Twitter is always B_Bertie98. Peruvian Waltz Twitter is at @PruWaltz.
There's no underscore, Brian. There is no underscore. How many times do I have to tell you guys?
Okay, well, Christopher, what is your Twitter?
I'm Christopher Viscardo, and you can find me at vis_FC.
Brilliant. And Peter, what is your Twitter?
No underscore in my Twitter either. It's at GalindoPW. And the Peruvian Waltz Twitter is simply at Peru Waltz. There's no underscore at the beginning. There's no underscore in the middle. There's no underscore at the end. Just Peru Waltz, nice and simple. One day Brian will get that right. Believe you me. Then again, he doesn't use the Twitter account as much as I do, so I guess I have an advantage in that area. And yeah, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes as well, if you so please.
Okay, so thank you guys for watching. I'm not going to do a terrible outro like I did, I think 2 weeks ago, where I said "Stay Gold Bang" or something. I don't know. It was a Cowboy Bebop reference, but it was terrible. So, and the pod just in the regular way. We're signing off. Thank you for listening. Make sure you catch us next week around the same time. See ya.